Welcome to the Birds and the Bees podcast. This is Braxton Dutson.
That's the key. People aren't talking about it.
Everybody needs to know that porn is not a documentary.
It's not like if we don't talk to kids about sex and sexuality, they're not going to hear about it. They're just not going to hear about it from us.
They have tons of questions, they just don't know how to ask them.
All you have to do is be one chapter ahead. You don't have to know everything. Just one chapter ahead of wherever your child is.
What have you been told sex would feel like for the first time? How do I keep novelty in a committed long-term relationship? What kind of sex life do I want my child to have when they become adults? Earthly Parents are the author of the book, and it was very good. One member of Earthly Parents joins me today to explore these questions and address many of the myths that people believe about sex. Hey everybody, this is Braxton Dutson. Welcome to Birds and Bees podcast. I'm so glad to have you hive mates with me once again. If this is your first time, welcome to the show. If you're a longtime listener, thank you for your continued support. Really appreciate you being here on the show. This interview is unique because we will be speaking to individuals who identify themselves with a more orthodox religious belief. While this book is directed more towards members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the discussion is relevant to anyone who's planning on being in a committed relationship while also participating in religion. As for the last question, what kind of sex life do I want my child to have when they are adults? We help parents explore this question for themselves as a tool to guide conversations with young adults as they look towards their future relationships. The authors have generously offered this book to the Birds and Bees podcast listeners for free. All you need to do is email earthlyparents@gmail.com and ask for the book. That's earthlyparents@gmail.com. They'll email you a copy of the book, and I've personally found this book to be a great tool for those who want to address sex in the relationship while being a part of a more orthodox religious belief system. Especially if you're a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They bring scriptures, they bring from the Bible, from the Book of Mormon, and also from culture, what prophets have said as well. So I'm looking forward to having you listen to this interview. There's a lot of great information, and I am glad to have you once again on Birds and Bees podcast. If you find this episode supportive or you know someone that could use this information, please feel free to send them a link. And as always, if you have a question or a comment, please call me and leave a voicemail at 385-449-1818. You can also send a text or send me an email at birdsandbeespodcast@gmail.com. So glad to have y'all listening to the show once again, and I'm excited to get into this interview. Thank you for tuning into Birds and Bees podcast. Hey, welcome to Birds and Bees podcast. This is Braxton, and I'm here with Earthly Parents today. Thank you so much for being here with me.
I was born Earthly. That's the name, Earthly. That is not my real name, but it's a pleasure.
It's not his real name, but that's the pen name, I guess we'll go for, because you wrote a book called Earthly Parents, and that's what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah. So I use the pen name Earthly Parents. I think that's probably the first question everybody has. Why would you write a sex manual with the name Earthly Parents? Well, there are two of us. My wife edited the book, but is not comfortable with having our names out there for people at church to look over at us and think that they have a webcam in our bedroom or anything like that. It's not... You've had discussions with people that talk to younger kids, maybe even younger teens or into the teen years. This is a pre-marriage book, so it is not stinting on the details, and that can be too exposing to some people. My wife is great. She asked me. That was her. That was her requirement. Yes, we are in marriage, and that marriage means that you work for each other.
Yes, I love that. I'm so glad that you guys have been in talking to each other and bringing what's important in the relationship, who's comfortable with what. Because as I read your book, it brought up questions that I really wanted our listeners to recognize and have themselves, especially for parents or even individuals that are thinking about being married right now, or they have kids that are about ready to get married. And this is a book that is specific towards the LDS population, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint. However, as I read through it, I believe this could work towards many individuals that come from more orthodox, maybe more strict livings from other religions as well. That it's not. You go into such great detail that I'm really excited to share this with our listeners, because the information you have in there is quite useful for anyone thinking of getting married, as well as parents that want to help their kids have fulfilling, happy, supportive sex lives. And we don't have these conversations, so I applaud you for starting this conversation or attempting more of the conversation.
It's interesting that multiple religions would have essentially the same downsides and upsides, I think, to the upbringing. I think that's not because it's the religion's fault necessarily, right?
Yeah.
It's the culture. Yeah. This is a culture that's grown up in, and at least my background is America. America that was that's been raised through the 1950s, a baby boomer generation that was raised by parents who came from that group. And then we had the sexual revolution and the reaction against the sexual revolution. And so for a group of people that were either young adults or raised in the late 1970s, the 1980s, and the early 1990s, that's a culture that's a culture. And that culture goes across a lot of religions, sometimes against what the religion actually teaches, surprisingly enough. And so there's kind of counter, I wouldn't call it revolution, but a counter understanding of what the actual teachings might be in different religions. But we still have the same cultural baggage, or at least very similar ones, some of which is, I'll admit, is fantastic, right? Mm-hmm. Cultures are not themselves, this isn't I'm not decrying the culture. Yeah, it's not that it's a bad culture. It's just, it has its own issues that come up there. I think, to be specific, like one that's pretty common, you just kind of run into this pretty quickly, is that people don't feel necessarily all that good about being sexual in marriage. Mm-hmm. They feel that it's impure somehow, or they've built up a belief that their virtue is tied up in being asexual, in denying sexuality. Yes. And so that's a common theme that has gone through kind of purity culture within the evangelical community, and certainly was what I grew up with as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's just part of what we have as kind of our legacy that we were gifted, so to speak, from our parents. And so that's it. I'm
curious about how, with seeing this legacy, is this a part of why you and your wife decided to write this book, or what? Tell me a little bit about what started this ball rolling.
So I came from a part member family, and I don't know if this is the part member part of it, meaning that one of my parents was a member of the church, and the other parent was not. And so that's kind of in the middle. I'd hear things from both sides, rather, growing up. And one thing that at least my parents had, I don't know if they knew they had it, but in the very top shelf of the bookshelf downstairs, I could climb up to read basically everything that was on there, including history books, and this book called Everything You Wanted to Know About Sex But Were Afraid to Ask, which I read before puberty. I found that to be useful. I mean, I wasn't surprised about anything particularly. I mean, I didn't know what this word orgasm meant. Why would they misspell organisms in a book? I couldn't quite work that one out in my prepubescent mind, but okay. But those lessons, even though some of them were now we know to be kind of off, but many of them weren't. They were just the best knowledge at the time, or what knowledge was out there. And that was helpful to me in certain cases where I would hear things from, say, other church members, or in my ward at BYU, where Brigham Young University, where I would hear things that is nonsense. Like there was a belief that some of the people had on our at the time that oral sex was not allowed, and I knew from my reading that would doom some reasonable percentage of women from never having an orgasm, because that's the only way that they can, and that didn't seem remotely right to me. And I was just glad that I had that. And then when I was married, I'm just the nerd that did the homework, right? So it was still an experience. You can read all you want about riding a bike, and it's not the same as riding a bike, but at least I've got the brakes in the front, and I better not pull this brake too hard, otherwise I'm going to go head over heels, and I better be careful on this other brake, and I know I need to go at least a little bit fast, otherwise I'm going to fall over or whatever, right? Those things we learn sometimes by reading, and then lots of things by doing. And so my feeling was that for my own kids, I have 7 kids, that I really wanted them to have kind of pass the issues and have really the benefit of my upbringing that way, upbringing through books. So it's a pretty book-specific culture.
Definitely. And with and in writing this book, I can imagine that there is, as I was reading what you'd written or reading the book, I thought, as an adult, sometimes it can be really hard to think of our children as sexual beings. And I imagine you had to start seeing your 7 kids as sexual beings, not just as kids. Was it hard to get to that place? Were there any barriers that you ran into?
Not really, not for me. That never really bothered me. What I really wanted and what I had to decide consciously was, what kind of sexual experience do I want my kids to have? Do I want one that's going to be at times a little bit miserable? Do I want them to have one that is more fulfilling to them? So I had to think about it. And then in my mind, what gaps do I need to make sure that they get filled to get from where we are now, like where I kind of think the culture and even what upbringing I was able to give them kind of deposits them to the next, where I think that they will be happiest and most fulfilled. I think all of us can do this. It doesn't matter what parent or what culture or what background we have. Imagine pretty clearly what it is we want for our kids. And I want them to have fantastic, tight sex lives that just bring them and draw them closer together with their spouses, so that they are just, they have that bulwark against what's a very, very hard world. I see from time to time, some marriage that falls apart, and you hear what's gone on behind the scenes, and you're just like, oh, that is so sad. It's just so discouraging and disheartening. And how close, I wonder what some of them might have been if they had just gotten over what tends to be the biggest problem that they face, if that's their problem, if that's something from adultery, or if it's just they don't get along sexually from some reason or another, because it's something that they just could have known or done differently, or just, if they just had the manual, then they would have been able to step past something. And that's just tragic to think through that. I mean, and I had that sense from my own, like, okay, this is what I want. These are the problems I had. But I went out and I did a survey as part of this book of asking people what their experiences were in the honeymoon or kind of beyond. And some of the stories there are, no, I don't want that for my girls or my boys at all. And so, then you try to think, well, what else do I have to do to get them there?
Definitely. It's from what I see as parents come in and talk with me, and as people write me for the podcast, is that this is one of the first things that parents have to work through in talking to your kids about sexual health. Not just when they're younger, or we're talking about puberty. I'm talking about they're getting to be adults, and parents start to feel really uncomfortable because there is that shift that has to happen. My child is going to be a sexual person. Some people feel a little bit more comfortable when marriage happens. Okay, we got them married, and now I can know that they're going to have sex, but it's within a marriage, and I can deal a little bit better with that. And when it comes to other situations, it's not that easy. Sometimes when maybe a teenager is a sexual individual, or we're thinking of, well, what about masturbation or these other things? And so they're not focusing so much on, what does my child do what do I want my child to have as a sexual being? I love that question. What kind of sexual experiences do I want my children to have? And you say, and I want it to be so close and so bonding that I want them to have the information and not have any of it laid out to a lack of information. That the only reason things started to be problematic is because the lack of information. And I think that's a great place for any parent to start, start imagining your child as, that older child that is a sexually active person, then what do you want them to know? And I love that's the way that you took this book, as well as the way that you're talking to your kids about this.
I think the fear a lot of parents have, and I don't know that it's a founded fear, it's just a fear that we have, is that if we talk about sex, that we will make our kids more likely to have sex in a time frame that would be uncomfortable for us. And I can't say that that won't happen. They're agents. They can make decisions. They will make decisions. But denying them information, I think, is probably worse. I think you probably have more information on what exactly the data are. But everything I've read is the more information you give, the less likely they are to act earlier on the information. So I'm speaking specifically about comprehensive sex ed, but this I suspect is true of anybody who has factual information to get out there, is that you will have associated with fewer unintended pregnancies, more delayed sexual intercourse, fewer sex partners, fewer diseases. Like, if I had to do all those things and I had to climb up a mountain and throw myself off a cliff and wade through a stream and go through snow, I think every parent would do that. Mm-hmm. But we don't have to do that. Mm-hmm. All we have to do is be the one to tell them more about sex so that they're not confused, ignorant, and go with curiosity, as you kind of point out, to go look at porn and get the right information.
Yeah. When we're not talking about it, the information is going to be dispersed, whether it's through you or whether it's through pornography or stories or friends, or there's a lot of other places to get information. We want it coming from parents that are educated, that are just one chapter ahead of their kids in talking about this. I love the way that you put that, because it is so important that there is a lot of research, and if the kids know about knowing that pornography is not real, or like it's not a documentary on people's sexual lives. The other thing is you're talking about this, we're talking about sex related to like the physical act of sex. But even as we're having conversations about what it's like to be broken up with, and kissing and other parts of sexual health, there's many other conversations than just how penetrative sex works. And the more comfortable we get with that, the more comfortable they are with talking to us. So I love that that's the case. In the book, I love that you covered probably the number one thing, or one of the main reasons that people come see me, these men come to see me, is because they experience a lot of anxiety around premature ejaculation or erectile dysfunction. And the information, just as for example of what you just said, is when the information has been given beforehand, there's a lot less anxiety when it happens. So I see men all the time come in and talk to me about how on their wedding night, they saved themselves for marriage, they were virgins, and they were about to have sex and lost their erection, and despair flooded their body with, oh no, I have erectile dysfunction. And she's disappointed in me, and I don't know what I'm going to do about this. I've got to make this work. And then a performance anxiety develops, when all the information that they need to know is, hey, when you're real excited, when you've had a really stressful day, or a new life change is happening, or there's something else that's going on in your brain, it's not uncommon for a man to lose an erection. All of a sudden, that small piece of information that you did include in your book is, hey, some people do experience erectile dysfunction, but hey, give it a pause. I think you said about a month from the research that you had done, where it's like, hey, check in for a month. And if there's problems after that, then start seeking some professional support and help, but just continue on. And that would help so many of the people that have come to see me, just that tidbit of information. So that's a great example in your book, as well as in the therapy sessions that I see, that the more we can talk to our kids about this and give them correct information, the better.
I think with premature ejaculation in particular, the most common sexual complaint of men is to know that it has to happen within 1 minute.
Yeah.
If you can last 1 minute, it is not premature ejaculation. And that I don't know what percentage of people that come in and think that they have a problem, find out not really a problem. But just knowing that one piece then can change you from thinking and labeling yourself and then getting the anxiety that makes it less likely next time that you are able to hold off. Because if you're anxious, it's harder then, and your muscles tense up and you're even worse off. And then you have the anxiety of when it will happen next time. That's a snowball. And that's a snowball that is very easily corrected the first time if you go, it was 2 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
I guess I'm fine. In fact, it's probably normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with you. It makes me wonder as you're writing this book and you were reading the stories of people that had shared their experiences with you. Was there a point in time that you decided or not ran out of information, but we were like, what else do I put in this book? I mean, you're trying to create a comprehensive overall thing for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint members that are about to get married. Was there information that you found yourself trying to decide if you would keep in the book? Anything you wanted to put in but weren't quite sure at the time?
Sure. So in general, I could work pretty logically through all the pieces that needed to be there. Some of them were pretty obvious. If you don't know the steps and the process and through sexual pleasure for a woman and a man, then you're not going to know what you're doing at all. If you don't know anatomy, especially of the female, then like many of the people that responded to the survey said they didn't know where their own clitoris was, or just had no anatomy idea at all. It's kind of shocking in today's world, but there you have it. Like, that's where they are. Okay, we can bridge that gap. That gap is a pretty easy bridge to make. In addition, I might say in looking things up, I mean, because then I had to look things up, lots and lots of manuals, lots and lots of podcasts so that I could go through your podcast is one, to go through things to really get the breadth of information that's out there scientifically. With the clitoris in particular, there's been a revolution in the last decade in how much is known about it, that it's about as large as a penis, but mostly interior. That what people perceive as being pleasurable experience from intercourse, maybe through parts of the clitoris that are underneath the surface, and they kind of all link up together in a Voltron-like effect as it gets engorged with blood. So they then work together later on. That you need 20 minutes roughly of foreplay to be able to get a clitoris to that state. I mean, these are all things that those have come up kind of in the time since I read the everything you wanted to know about sex, but were afraid to ask. I might not have been afraid to ask, but the science has moved on. So I did a lot of that to be able to get there. And then it's just working one after another after another. You did ask if there were some things I left on the cutting room floor and things maybe I left out. Those are both separate but good questions. I'll do with the things I left out, and maybe something to talk about later. Masturbation as a solo activity is so controversial in our religion that it felt like I would lose the audience if I went there. And I had the additional, problem of not being sure myself about what I thought about it. So I didn't feel comfortable really relaying that information. I feel A-okay talking about oral sex. I don't know what I think completely, though it's changed, I think, probably in the course of writing the book, what I had thought about masturbation. So I didn't put it in. That was totally a dodge. That's not because it was a super reasoned effort. It's because I wanted to put in what I really felt sure about, either because the data were there or because it was non-controversial, or you could see how the controversy was so far in the past that it didn't seem to be current. That may be changing in our church. I don't know for sure, but the word masturbation is being taken out of a lot of church documents and instructions. And so maybe we'll have some more clarity, or at least less direction, which counts as clarity in some cases, in a short time. But I don't know, and I'm not. I am in the religion. I'm not seeking to burn the barn down, burn down the house.
Yeah. So, and that's what I think about when it comes to, and I'm glad you're bringing this up. One, I think it's really difficult to talk about masturbation in a text form.
Yeah.
We can create a lot more nuance with voice, if you will. One of the things that, because I'm not out to tell people if masturbation is okay, solo masturbation is okay within a certain relationship or marriage, because in some relationships it is absolutely not okay. They don't feel comfortable. They've decided this is not a part of our relationship agreement. And I would, even as a therapist, never recommend solo masturbation if that were the case. I feel like that can add problems. It can add issues that don't need to be there. What I do like about what you cover in masturbation in the book is that partnered, manual stimulation, you touching your partner, or you being present while masturbation is occurring, and there's this agreement that is going on between the relationship, and both parties feel comfortable. One thing I do encourage anybody, whether it's LDS individuals or anyone that's a part of a religion that may have a little bit more of a say on what or that sexual expression could be portrayed in something that is sinful, or that masturbation by itself may be more of a selfish thing, that talking with your partner about it, exploring what the word masturbation means in the relationship, what consists of masturbation, what is okay within the relationship, what's not, and then also taking it up with the deity, whether it be God, whether it be the universe, whatever it is that you and your relationship have been exploring is, or that you worship and get your understanding from, that communicating with deity, praying and finding out if solo masturbation is okay for this relationship, and then talking about it. And the more you can have open dialogue and conversations, that's where I think the real conversation and learning can be, is getting the education and then deciding what your values in your relationship can be. Because then no one can tell you that masturbation's right or wrong within your relationship, because that's between you and God and your partner.
Yeah. And it's one where the rules are so thin on the ground these days,
Yes.
At least in our religion, which may surprise some of the people in the religion, but you start to look like they're backing away of telling you exactly what you can do and what you can't do. That's their prerogative, I guess, but that means that we're on our side responsible for figuring it out. And the figuring out with God, great. Let's figure that out, God and spouse, and see what's there. Maybe this is one of the places where we're left to our own devices, because otherwise we don't develop the tools to be able to make these decisions. Hopefully we get a little bit of the easy ones, and
Yes,
not just the hard ones about, in this case, is it okay for me to sleep with these 5 other women because they feel really bad, or some dumb like that. Like we're never in that moral. Hopefully by the time we're in a moral quandary over something like that, we've had and developed some experience over deciding this is right, this is wrong. Here's why I think so. I'm going to act this way and act on it. And definitely not asking people to act against what they have as their deeply held beliefs. Just make sure that you're comfortable with them and really articulate them in your mind. Otherwise, you'll find that your own desires act against your beliefs. If you can't bring those things in line, you're gonna. I'm sure you see this more than I do with my own family, but as your patients, when they act one way and they believe another way, those actions are going to win eventually, and that's pretty distressing for people, because they're kind of tearing themselves apart and living one life, trying to be a different life, and those things don't really work together. And if you can bring your actions and your beliefs in line with each other, then people are happier. I feel pretty good about where I got myself to this, but I have to admit, when I started the book, I didn't really quite know what exactly I believed, so I had to think through it. Really had to think through it pretty carefully, so that I didn't pass on something that I'd hopefully regret very, very quickly. I didn't want to do that. I just something that I felt was on at least sure enough ground that I could give it to my own kids and not think I just fed them some kind of self-justifying nonsense. That was probably my biggest fear, is that I'd be justifying something I just wanted to do, that I was in that situation where I wanted to act one way and had like a belief a different way. I can say at the end of this, those things are pretty much in line there. I don't have that.
Oh, that's
Right
wonderful.
now.
Yeah, not
I'm not
pushing
patting
you.
myself on the back, but yeah, that was I thought important, that I really believe what I put out, that I didn't just put that this is a good idea for someone else.
That you were backing it for with different research, or backing it with what professionals are saying, versus putting out an emotional, this is what needs to happen.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would have been okay with this is what needs to happen if I at least believed it. But I'm just going to take up an example that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say that I were secretly watching some kind of fairly disturbing pornography, and I put out there that really this should be okay. But I didn't really believe it myself, but I was putting it out there just to justify it, so I didn't feel bad about what I was doing, trying to get other people on my side. That is definitely not my intention with any of this. I can say of myself that's not in my heart. That isn't to say that this is actually a webcam into our bedroom. I don't do everything in the book. I try to figure out what people did in marriage, because it's not just my experience. It's supposed to be the experience of people that are married.
That's what I like the most, is that it didn't sound as though like this was something that was just, hey, this is what we do, so this is what you should do too. It was all about exploring your own what's okay with you, which is one thing that if we have listeners listening right now, say they're about to get married, or they're engaged and they've decided that they want to be celibate until marriage, or they're taking they're not going to have sex until they're married. And we're talking about masturbation, oral sex, anal sex, and vaginal sex. It is important to have these conversations prior to. And I'm curious about what you came across, or what your thoughts were when it comes to if they feel uncomfortable or embarrassed, or they're afraid they're going to face too much temptation by talking about what they want to experience and what they're excited about, but exploring these sexual desires and feelings with each other. What thoughts do you have on that, on what they could do to help themselves feel a little bit more comfortable, maybe less embarrassed, or address those fears?
Well, this is a call out to any Latter-day Saint researchers at the university level, that if you want to do a controlled clinical study, you could randomly hand out my book, and it was very good, by Earthly Parents, to people as they go into pre-temple pre-marriage interviews, and see whether or not, how quickly they ended up getting married in the temple. That could be the measure.
Yeah.
That's a short answer for saying, who knows if this is really true? I can argue about why I think it's true, but nobody actually knows, because nobody's done this particular study. It's not that sense of, yes, it's true that comprehensive sex ed leads to outcomes that I desire as a parent. I think most of the people that listen to this, if not every single one of them, would desire that for their kids. And so it's pretty clear. Now, is that true of somebody who is 6 months before marriage, that if they get a bunch of information, a download on this is what you do when you're married, what happens to them? Are they less or more likely then to delay sexual experience until the marriage? I can see some arguments on both sides, and the argument of more information makes people more curious. Well, I mean, sometimes less information is what makes people more curious. So I'm going to kind of put that on at least both sides of the scale and say I don't find that argument to be all that compelling. What I do kind of think, and why I would do something like this, is not because I'm worried about that particular problem. That particular problem, I think I don't know if this is going to be better or worse. I think it will be better from the argument from the comprehensive sex ed side, but I don't know that. What problems I do see that can be solved by something like this are things like, I didn't have an orgasm for 10 or 20 years, which is that is a non-zero number of people. That is more than 4 people, I think, that said that just within a quick survey of this. So that's 4 out of about 50 women that kind of that said that back to me, or a year or 2 years or whatever. I mean, that's just, can you imagine? That's not cool. And I don't want that for my kids. And the vast majority of people that responded to the survey, the people that respond to a survey, something like this, but even with that, said the wedding night was pretty not cool at all. Like it was painful, which it shouldn't be painful. It was there was blood they didn't expect, and they were traumatized by that. A few people with vaginismus, which is this, as you know, this kind of sealing of the vagina that makes sex impossible. And if you try harder, then it gets worse and worse.
Yes.
So don't do that. You need to know that. And a general lack of information about what it takes to give a woman a pleasurable experience. It really struck me that we could solve those problems. And that's what I'm trying to get people past for my own kids and for other people that are within my culture, my brothers and sisters, because that's the barrier that we have, at least some of the big ones. And you get past those things, and honeymoon as a pleasant experience, maybe not the best sex, but you know what? It's first times are cool. But not a traumatic experience.
Yes.
Traumatic experiences. Like even the one you said about somebody who had erectile dysfunction on a wedding night and then didn't know that was normal-ish, right? It happens, right?
Yeah.
And not to think that it was going to happen more and more, and attributed a meaning to it. That was a pretty negative meaning. That's very confusing. Like these things are all solvable. It's so easily solvable with information. So
yeah, definitely.
let's get information out there. I mean, sure, we could go give them The Guide to Getting It On, which is a great book, but probably not acceptable to a lot of people within the culture. So let's get a book that is acceptable to people in the culture.
Yes.
And that's what I tried to do with my book.
Definitely. What would you say to newly or engaged individuals that feel embarrassed or uncomfortable about these conversations? How might they feel more comfortable?
Well, it's kind of the same situation in a sense of what we have as parents, right? Like it's an uncomfortable conversation, but it beats the heck out of the alternative. If the one side is you roll the die and take a chance that things are going to be unpleasant and fairly traumatic and deeply disturbing, like walking on a plane and somebody says, well, it's a 90% chance that the plane will make it. You don't get in the plane.
No.
You at least want to read the manual and figure out how you're going to get out the escape hatch at one point, right? Versus having the information, and it is embarrassing, but it can be, but so what? It's so much less awkward and potentially traumatic than it will be when you don't know what to do, when you don't know if you're supposed to call the doctor, when you don't know why is this not working, and she's crying, and you're just sitting there up all night worried that this is not the right person to have married, because can you imagine this is all it is that you don't want that?
No, you don't. I like to think of, or I like to help newly engaged couples or people that come to see me kind of as a pre-marriage workshop or pre-marriage therapy, that if they're feeling uncomfortable, one, they've come to me, the ones that I've talked to, and they're saying, hey, we want to have these conversations. And that's one way to go about it. The other way is I've seen or talked to some people like, well, if we start talking about it, I get real excited and she gets excited, and we're worried about having sex prior to being married because they start talking about what they want to experience, and in some situations they felt like they were alone and they're like, oh no. So being able to plan these conversations, I love that you're saying it's better to explore them versus just, well, I hope that this doesn't turn out bad later, but being able to express, hey, this is what I'd like to experience. I've even told couples to start up with, having these conversations over Zoom or over Skype, to where it's like, if you're really worried about the physical aspect of it, have these conversations, still have them with the information, and do it remotely so that that you can have the conversation without being worried that there's going to be this now physical draw, because talking about sex is in itself a turn on. You're talking about sex. It's a natural part of moving and in progression and being connected with someone, and you're going to feel connected having these conversations, especially the more that you can practice them and have a topic you're going to talk about or something that, even though you may feel embarrassed, you're feeling embarrassed because we don't talk about it, and society's really done a pretty rough job at making you feel comfortable talking about it, but you can build that so it feels just as natural as talking about finances or what you guys want to do for the weekend, and but to not avoid it because you're afraid that there's going to be too much temptation or it feels uncomfortable. But being able to practice however you're going to can be really supportive. I think one of the other things that I wonder about is even though people start talking to each, or that these couples may talk with each other, I'm curious about some of the myths maybe that you've heard. Did you? I don't know all the questions you asked on that Facebook, but what kind of myths did you really want your kids to make sure they didn't get going into marriage?
So I'm thinking through the list of it. There certainly are myths out there, but it's usually a lack of information kind of myth. It's not like it's been replaced with a different story, though that I guess does happen. So the lack of information pieces, we've named some of them. Some of the others, like big one, is that intercourse is kind of the culmination of all sexual activity. And if you aren't able to have orgasm, simultaneous no hands orgasm, like I saw on name HBO movie,
any of them.
Then something's wrong. Like, what's wrong with me? That's not only normal, that's more than half of women have that experience, and where they just never have an orgasm during intercourse.
Yeah.
And another quarter have it only when it's basically clitoral stimulation, and the other quarter can do it no hands, but they prefer clitoral stimulation. Like, if you didn't know those things, what do you think when you don't have that experience? You think you're a terrible lover, or you're broken, and that ain't cool. And that is not what I wanted for my kids. So that is probably the number one kind of, I'd say, myth or just belief that's out there. Is like, well, of course. I mean, it's natural. You'd think that would happen. I think another myth, though not described as such in the book, is that you just think it's all going to work out. Like, yeah, maybe, but maybe. Good luck. I mean, really, it might, but it's not. It's not how you most likely win the game, any more than it is to go on and try to play a video game for the first time without a manual and just jump right in and hope that you're going to just win without ever losing a life. I mean, that's just dumb. You don't do that. Why would something that is so complex as human sexuality be just natural and easy? I mean, yes, we all got here. I agree. That all that tells you is that men were able to have orgasms in a vagina. That doesn't tell you that they were good at it. It doesn't tell you that they were good people. It doesn't tell you that the women liked any of it. It just tells you that we got here. And that is not what I think any of us want.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think some of the as you bringing it up with all it's been is that a male was able to have an ejaculation into a vagina, and that the sperm and egg met up, that all of us are here, but not thinking of, was it a positive experience? I mean, we don't know that. We have this assumption of what it looks like and what it feels like and what other people are experiencing. And I think that's a big myth, like what you're talking about, is this expectation everyone else is experiencing a certain type of sexual experience or feeling. Some of the other ones that I think of that come to mind are that sex is supposed to hurt for the woman. I mean, I know you talked about that earlier. And
to replace that just right there, like what is the true story? Sex is never supposed to hurt. So if it hurts, something is wrong. And if you haven't done about 20 minutes of non-genital stimulation followed by at least some genital stimulation, then it's probably going to hurt. And maybe you should have lots of lube, because especially on a first night, you're going to be stressed and maybe even a little dehydrated because you were trying to look good for the wedding picture. So you were kind of starving yourself or whatever, right? Like, all those things are there. Just these are practical things just to keep yourself in a place that the first time is pleasant and not disturbing.
Yeah, most definitely. I love that you brought up lube, because lube is such an important aspect of For some reason, there's this thought that if you use lube, then all of a sudden either the woman doesn't love the person or something's broken. Or no, lube is great for any situation. It's great to have lube because right off the bat, if you're touching genital places, if there's not lube, it can hurt. Even if you're trying the 20 minutes of stimulation beforehand and then some genital stimulation, having lube's great. And it can add pleasure to both partners. A lot of people think of it as like, well, it's got to be natural or nothing. And it doesn't. I like to think of it as, using reading glasses or us, adding different seasonings to food that is already great. It's not, doesn't mean that the food is bad. It doesn't mean that anything's bad. It's just something that you can experience to improve sexual experiences with each other.
Yeah, along those same lines, I think probably vibrators for most people in the church would fall into that camp where they feel that it's, I don't know, unnatural, uncomfortable, weird, kinky. I don't know, insert your adjective there. But it's so important for many women that's one of the surest way to an orgasm, especially somebody learning to orgasm for the first time. Mm-hmm. I think that also, just as a note there, that's another myth to hit, is that orgasm is itself as a female natural. It might be super easy for a man, but it's a learned behavior for women, it seems like. And so just knowing that, does it happen naturally? No, you gotta figure it out. And the number one easiest way to do that is through self-stimulation or through sometimes with a sex therapist. That's like 95% rate of getting somebody who is aorgasmic to orgasmic is that, and often with a vibrator. With like an hour.
Yeah.
And solved.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that the partner is bad. It doesn't mean that the person is broken. None of it. You nailed it on the head. You got the information, and a vibrator is an aid, and that aid can be there for forever. It can be there for the rest of the relationship, and that doesn't mean it's bad. It can be there for a couple times. None of it, we can't get into the good or bad. The one thing that stood with me the most from a couple I was working with, in fact, a couple of women I was working with, is that their partner said, well, what if this vibrator, like you like the vibrator more than me? And I'll never forget it. The partner said, the vibrator doesn't have a heartbeat. It's not warm. It's not the thing that I want to hold and cuddle me. It feels good for orgasm. It does not feel connecting. It gives me no connection. It gives me no love and support and all the other things that makes me want to be a sexual person. It helps me get to orgasm. And I was like, whoa, that is powerful. And that I would love every couple to understand and recognize that you're not being replaced because a vibrator or lube or anything is being introduced into the relationship for sexual pleasure. That if both of you are consenting to it and it helps a partner get to a certain place, wonderful. That's great. It's an aid.
It is an aid. You can get them online at Walmart and at Target, but not Costco. So sorry, Latter-day Saint shoppers.
Yes. Isn't it the thing? Latter-day Saint shoppers and Costco's go hand in hand. Oh, man.
I like what you said about it being kind of like a spice to already good food, or something that makes a little bit of good food better. And that can be. And so why not try? I think that the one thing that especially long married couples, so not people that are just entering into marriage the first time, but long married couples, that's where adding some kind of sexual novelty can be very important. Sexual novelty is something that our brains seek. We look and we like that feeling of learning. It feels awkward the first time, but your brains are looking for it a lot. And so one of the things that I found as I researched for the book is that this was important and needed to be something that I needed to think about. And if you do introduce some kinds of sexual novelty safely within your own marriage, then you're giving yourself that extra boost, once, twice, 3 times a year, something like that. It's something different from what you do normally, different position, something like a vibrator, something like lube if you don't use lube. candles,
Yeah.
I don't know, whatever, something different. That then people don't look I'm not saying that they won't look outside the marriage for sexual novelty, but they can get sexual novelty within the bonds of marriage, and if sexual novelty is important, that's what I'm reading, sexual novelty is important, then, well, maybe that's our job.
Yeah. I like that the way that you worded it is I've never heard it worded that way. And I really like novelty is our brains look for novelty because it's looking for learning, a new experience. It likes the change. And that, again, doesn't mean that your relationship's bad or you've hit the 7-year mark or whatever it is. It's, hey, find different ways to be learning and fun and to experience each other in this way.
I think that's one with the learning experience that's also useful, not just from straight scientific experience that most of the book is in. Most of the book is clinical information, scientific information. This is just the whatever I could find that was really this is how it works. But there are also some things that I hope help people through things that are a little bit spiritually challenging sometimes for us, and that's one of them. Anytime we do something new, yes, I named a situation where we like sexual novelty, but new things the first time make us feel a little dumb, a little awkward, a little bit, I don't know if I like that. That doesn't sound very appealing to me. And that's doubly true of sexual things. So the idea that we can know beforehand from an uncomfortable feeling that something is not going to be very good for us sexually is probably false. That's hard for us because that is a common teaching in our culture, that one of the ways to get and to go to the Lord and say, should I be doing this act or another act? You might not know until you do it. I mean, if somebody described, I think, something like French kissing to you, if you've never done it, that'd sound pretty strange, like pretty gross. Like, who would like that? Yet it's a common part of sexual experience. And so you take these other things that are not specifically prohibited, but somebody's going to feel uncomfortable if they've never done it before. Try it a few times. It's hard to know what you're going to like until you do it, with the exception of the things that your brain just tells you, I like that, before you've ever tried it. So some of those, we're wired to do and want, but other things not. And especially for things that are just, there's no way that we evolved to think a vibrator would be really, really good in sex. I mean, no vibrators for X number of thousands or millions of years, right? So it's not, there's no way that that's going to be natural. That's when you're going to have to try to see if you like it. Try it 3 or 4 times. And then I can tell my own kids. I can't tell anybody else. I don't have any authority outside of my own family as a spiritual matter, but I can tell my own kids this. And, you want to take my advice or not that I'm giving my kids, try it a few times. You probably don't have really access to a spiritual confirmation for something that you don't actually understand. So try to understand it a little bit better. This is not a dangerous thing on the face of it, like using illicit drugs. This is not something that's criminal. There's nothing that's telling you truly that you can't do this. So try it, and then you might have a chance to know something. Sometimes maybe it's a wrong road for you. I don't know. Yeah. But you probably can't know some of these things until you try them, and that's different from should I try a threesome just to see whether it works? We have clear prohibitions against that. There are lots of reasons not to do that. I mean, that's it. It's in these places where there are no real rules in Scripture. There are no real rules that you can articulate. Just a lot of people that believe a lot of things, some of which I tell my kids, maybe the Spirit told this person and that was true from their marriage. And that's what and everything can be consistent. That's just what they were told for them. Maybe that's true. It might not be true for you. So definitely. Sexually, this is you, the Lord, and your spouse. And that's the authority level that you need to work under. Keep it under that roof.
Yeah, and I like that you're saying that to try things out. I think some of the ones that have come up that if someone is very not interested, this goes for partners. If you're really wanting to try something and your partner is saying absolutely not, that there needs to be more conversation around it. I think of when it comes to just an example of anal sex.
Sure.
That is definitely something within a relationship you could try. You could try a couple times. And for a lot of couples or individuals where they're saying, one person, the receiver, maybe, I don't want to do this. I have zero desire. This is not even something I'm willing to go that way. Don't try and coerce your partner into something that that can be what feels so invasive and anything along those lines.
Consent still matters. Consent still matters.
Yes, 100%. When you said it's between you, the Lord, and your partner, it is 100% that way, that if someone is not on, there's no, don't use this or anything else to try and coerce somebody into, hey, we need to at least try it a couple times, because you can end up with a relationship and a lot of betrayal feelings and a lot of hurt feelings that will negatively affect your sexual relationship and sometimes the emotional and mental and spiritual aspects of your relationship too. So don't push things on people that are not wanting to engage in oral sex. Again, have the conversation, get with a sex therapist. If it's something that is very important to you, work these things out, but don't coerce someone into them.
Yeah, the important part there is being able to work those things out. And that's another thing to talk. The other reason to have these kind of conversations before you're married is because then it gives you the chance to practice them for when you are married. The stakes are lower if you are trying to figure something out before you've done any of it, right? Mm-hmm. It's once you've done it, and now you've got, I'm very comfortable in this, and now there's this one other thing I want to try, but I don't know if they're going to think I'm perverted if I mention. Once we're there, then you really want to have established a pattern of being able to have these conversations. Truly, when we go into a honeymoon situation, it's a very good situation for the male. The male has probably, really high probability, has seen porn and has masturbated. So this person knows these things. This isn't the first time they've seen a naked person in a sexual situation. Mm-hmm. This is not the first time that they've had an orgasm and know what their body does. They are ready for intercourse. But if that's not true of the female and the wife going in there, then you are asking for the male to have a good experience and the wife to have made zero decision in it. It's just, well, of course that's what we do. Do you want to start your marriage off with no planning and no shared decision making?
Yeah.
There might be a better choice. And if you you find this pretty common, I think, in the she comes first sort of ideal. Uh-huh. You time yourself as a person who, as a man who's faster at being able to have orgasm or more easily aroused. You're setting yourself up to work to the dish that takes longer to get there, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, I know I can just throw the hamburger on the very hot stove and outside in the char griller and it'll be done fast. But if I don't start the potatoes now, the meal's not going to be really made right. Mm-hmm. And if we think about a honeymoon in that same way, you've got like this piece of I don't want to say piece of meat. That's probably the bad analogy there, but okay, very thin piece of analogy, but is going to burn instantaneously. Just has to be on the stove for a second, less than a minute in this case. That's going to that's going to cook fast. Mm-hmm. You don't have to worry about that. That's not on the critical path. That's not the way that you probably should be thinking about it. A better choice is to think through what the woman needs and wants, the timing she wants, and to delay for that, because this is the time of the greatest disparity between what you might want and are ready for as a man and what the woman might want and is ready for as a woman who maybe never had an orgasm, never touched herself, didn't feel comfortable doing that, has shut down her sexuality for years, is not ready, just not ready. So if that means that you are deciding together as a couple before you're married, this first night, yes, husband, you will get an orgasm, but it's going to be a hand orgasm the first night because I just want to get to know your body and you get to know mine. And the next night, maybe we'll do more. And then the next night, more. And then at some point, she's going to be ready for intercourse and is going to want it and ask for it. And then her body will be ready and her mind will be ready and the meal will be ready.
Yeah. Well, I like what you're talking about when it comes to the dual control model. And I use that in the terms of what the research is saying. But essentially, one person is the hot stove and is ready to go fairly quick. And this doesn't, I like that you said that a vast majority of men going into this will have seen pornography, have masturbated. Some won't. But we're looking at like 96% have.
Yeah, very, very high.
Very, very high.
Just assume it's a yes, even if they say no.
Yes.
And you're probably right. You're right. So often that's the way to bet.
Yeah, and so this is why we're talking in such a general purpose on this, just for those who are listening. But so for a vast majority of men, they're going to be the hot stove. For a vast majority of women, they're going to be the oven that needs to warm up and take time to cook and things like that. Those roles can also be switched.
Sure.
They're a little bit farther in between. However, they do happen. They do occur. And there's a lot of men that need time to warm up themselves. There's a lot of women that are just ready for sexual experiences very quickly and are more orgasmic. And just kind of depending on your partner, as well as how much your drive may be, that a lot of people come and talk to me about. But I love that you're saying that even it's going in the way of the analogy of the food, that it's like if we need a baked potato and we want the meat to be done at the same time, which we're talking about having orgasms at the same time, where we're climaxing at the same time, and everything you see in HBO and all the TV shows, that it is possible to get to that place, but we're not using penetrative sex or penis to vagina sex at that and expecting the man to last for 20 minutes when it's so common for a man to last. The average is roughly 4 to 6 minutes.
Yeah.
So being able to plan that in a sense and also make it really sexy and fun. So I love that you're bringing those up, because that communication, that experience is what we need to be able to plan and prep for, especially when it comes to the wedding night. One of the quotes you had in your book from a person that said, "I just hated knowing that my parents knew that I was going on my honeymoon night and that they knew I was going to have sex." And that's really common. In fact, I think that was one of the things when I was getting married that I did not feel comfortable knowing that all my siblings and my friends and all the jokes that were coming out was like, "Hey, hanging from the chandelier later on tonight." And oh man, that really threw me, even as an LDS male, that I was just like, "Oh yeah, I'm excited for it, but I really did not like everyone knowing I was leaving the party to go have sex." It just didn't. I didn't like that many numbers doing that, and so I also didn't like the fact that there seemed to be an expectation. And this is another part that can really affect relationships, like you're saying, with if you're expecting a certain thing and not talking about it, you're setting yourself up for disappointment, frustration, and being able to recognize you're going to be tired, and you don't have to have sex on your wedding night and all these other things that you were saying. So I appreciate you bringing that up. That's super important. I know that we're just about out of time, actually, but I do want to know, or I want to explore just a little bit about someone who has not had sex and their partner has. What are some things that you found, or that your thoughts on someone that feels insecure, or how they might be able to address their insecurities of, my partner had sex, I haven't, am I going to be any good?
Yeah, so that's going to be insecurities from both sides of the bed sheets, really, right? The more experienced partner is going to feel a little bit guilty, perhaps, about some of the things that the person has done and didn't say. At least in our culture, will feel awkward about that, unless it's like a remarriage or something like that. But in terms of somebody who's had sexual activity or many partners versus somebody who has had none, and this is the first time you're finding out, like that. That can be a pretty shaming situation. You think I'm a bad person, and it can also, of course, call into question the whole wedding. Right? Are we going to get married? I mean, that's a super scary thing to be able to admit that in the first place. It's about as vulnerable as you get, because you're asking somebody to do something that they they've never expected. Maybe they even have talked about how I could never have that. I am so happy that we saved each other or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you can enter the marriage with that kind of like the wound, like kind of full of pus and just hope it goes away. But that kind of leads to amputation sometimes. So maybe not such a good idea. So you kind of you have to work through that one. And it's a little bit scary to do so. And then as you do things, you might feel awkward and guilty as you do them. Then the other side is the one that you started with, which is also pretty disturbing for a lot of people, is that you could find that you're caught in negative thoughts. You think you're being compared to. You think that you get something like, some people get something like a PTSD sort of recursive thoughts. Every time you go into the bedroom, you start thinking about all the women that he was with, all the men that she was with, or whatever, in a sexual situation. And that is not sexy at all. That's not cool at all. It feels terrible, right? So, though in those situations, each side really, I suspect, should be aware that it's going to be going through what's going to be going through their partner's minds, and the one who's the less experienced partner probably needs to be reassured that she or he is the chosen one. That it's not denying that there was past sexual experience, but that, yeah, I had those, but I chose you. You were the one I chose, and use that as best you can to make them feel better about themselves in those kind of situations. For the one who's on the other side of the table thinking, my husband or my wife is feeling guilty about the situation, and I need to let them know that I don't hold it against them, or that I'm working through that, or I'm okay, or I feel desire for them. Like those sorts of things, just being aware that you're going to be in this situation. If you have at least a pretty large disparity of experience, that seems like it would be pretty common. I have a few data points on that, not enough. I assume you have many more data points on that. But that's what I once I saw that, I was like, okay, this is something at least to warn people about, get them to a place that they're able to think through it. And probably the other thing that at least I hope helps a little bit is that if somebody has sexual experience, that is nonetheless an asset. They do know things. They may know how to have better sex. They may make it easier for you as a wife or as a husband. That can be helpful. And seeing only one side of the balance. I mean, the experience was bought. It may have been bought with some pain, but the experience is there. And you can choose to make that a blessing and see it as a blessing in the marriage, because it can be. It just can't.
The thing that I, as you're wording it, they may know how to, like you're saying, they may know what feels best to them, which can improve to what you're saying, to have better sex with you, the partner, that you're able to be guided and supported, and this is what feels good. One of the things that I see come up the most is really trusting your partner, trusting that they do, if the word is forgive, they're not holding anything against you, or that when they say, yeah, this is, you are, who I want sexually, trusting that that's truth, that you're building the relationship on trust. I've found that education can be really helpful. So a male might be worried, well, what if his penis was bigger than mine? Finding out what average penis sizes are, where you're looking at,
5.1
quarter to 5, inches and things like that. I don't remember the exact averages, but they're around those inches.
Also, that essentially it's so common in sex surveys that women say it doesn't matter. What's the right penis? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Get over it. It does not matter. So if you know that, then,
Oh, yeah. In the book, you said, save yourself some money because there's no pills that make you larger either. 100% on it.
Yeah, that was all Natasha Helfer Parker. She suggested that one. I'm like, okay, I'll put that in there.
Yep. That is so true. And so a lot of these worries that come up are, the majority of the time when people come see me and they're worried about these things, or they ask me these questions, is they're worried about a social issue or a social media thing that has been taught to them. Am I going to last long enough? Am I big enough? Am I going to be able to please him? What are all these things? They tend to be the myths that culturally or society we've been taught, and we don't have a lot of information on, or we haven't been taught that, but there is good information. You're listening to this podcast, and it was very good. I mean, there's all these ways that you can learn evidence-based scientific facts and be able to understand and trust your partner that way. So I think that that's a great way to go about it, at least starting that conversation. Be open, be vulnerable, have those insecurities out so that you can get the information and really trust that, yeah, you are the chosen one. I love that that's how you go about it. I think for the very last thing before we're done for this this section of the interview is if you could leave our listeners with just one takeaway, what would you want that takeaway to be?
If there's one takeaway that I have that I want listeners to remember, it's that if you want a free book of this, you can email me at earthlyparents@gmail.com. I will just send you the PDF. I want people to get the information. I'll send you the whole book. It's totally free, and I just want people to be helped. If it helps people, I get emails, thousands of emails from people on that it is helpful. I want it to help. Share it with anyone.
Wow. Thank you so much for offering that. That is really, really cool. I appreciate that. With that being said, if someone wants to have a hard copy or a soft cover book, they can get, and it was very good on Amazon. Is that right?
You can get it on Amazon for $15 less. You can get it on Barnes & Noble, but the paper quality isn't quite as good, so go figure. You can also get Nook and Kindle pretty cheap. And then I'm working on the audiobook. I'll be done with it hopefully this week, and it'll be out soon.
And will that be on Audible?
That'll be on Audible.
Sweet. Wow, that's cool. So the book is And It Was Very Good by Earthly Parents. Is that right?
It is.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate you helping me explore what ways to have these conversations, as well as how to support those that are just about to start into this part of their life.
Thank you for what you do. And I mean that really sincerely, because I can tell with you and other people that are doing this or similar things, you're doing it because you're just trying to help people. And it's just noble what you're doing. I'm glad it's also your profession, because that's a noble profession. Just thank you.
I really appreciate that. Those are very nice words. Thank you again so much, everyone, for tuning in to Birds and Bees podcast. Remember to share this with anyone that you know that could use this information. Just like he said, we want this information out there to dispel myths and to give people the sexual health that we all deserve. So thank you again for tuning in. We'll see you in the next episode. Wasn't that a great interview? Man, I love interviews like this. Remember, we love when you send these episodes to your friends and family. There's a good chance you know someone who could use some extra support or the information that was just discussed in this last episode. Send them a link, tell them about it. You can send it through iTunes, send them the birdsandbeespodcast.com link. Any way that best will get them the information, and it can help a lot to those that you love. I really appreciate you sharing this. Please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. That helps us immensely with getting this content out. And know that I love you. Love the fact that you guys are helping me out with my goal in sharing this information with the entire world and changing the way that we talk about sexual health and changing the interactions we have with our kids as well as our partners. If you have any questions or you want to join the conversation, send me a call or give me a text at 385-449-1818. Send me an email, birdsandbeespodcast@gmail.com. All this is going to be great. Love to hear from you, Hive mates. And I look forward to talking with you guys in the next episode. So until then, keep the sexual health buzz alive, and I'll see you in the next episode.